Did you know that Red Bull could fire Helmut Marko after 20 years with the team? And that could be the beginning of the end for Max Verstappen at the team. What do you think? Should Verstappen stay if Marko leaves? So, what's happening inside Red Bull that could change everything? In this video, I explain why Red Bull is on the brink of an internal crisis that could end with Marko's departure, Verstappen's frustration, and a radical change in F1. After more than 2 decades at the helm, Christian Horner's abrupt departure from Red Bull on July 9, 2025, marked a turning point for the team. It wasn't just the departure of a successful director, but the visible beginning of a much deeper internal fracture. What many didn't know was that, behind its sporting success, Red Bull had been facing a power struggle between different factions within its organization. At the center of this battle was Helmut Marko, a sporting advisor and longtime figure for the team, whose influence and authoritarian style were beginning to be questioned by some in the corporate community. For much of 2024 and the early months of 2025, Marko and Horner were on opposite sides of this tension, with differing visions for the team's future, driver management, and overall strategy in the face of impending regulatory changes in Formula One. With Horner's departure, many expected Marko to consolidate his power within the Red Bull structure. However, the opposite happened. Attention turned to him as the possible next player to fall. Leaks began to emerge from within the team itself. Private meetings, disagreements with Red Bull Group executives, and open criticism from influential voices in the paddock began to outline a scenario in which his continued presence was no longer certain. The narrative shifted drastically. From being the mentor and protector of talents like Max Verstappen, Marko was now seen by some as an obstacle to the team's modernization. Helmut Marko was a trusted confidant of Dietrich Mateschitz, the founder of Red Bull, and his voice had a decisive influence on driver selection, sporting strategies, and structural decisions within the team. However, that influence began to wane after Mateschitz's death and the changes at the top of Red Bull's corporate leadership. The protection Marko enjoyed no longer exists, and today he faces a situation in which his presence within the team is no longer considered indispensable. As rumors of his possible departure spread, voices began to emerge questioning not only his methods but also his relevance in the new context of modern Formula One. Former driver Christijan Albers was one of the harshest, publicly stating that Marko had already served his life and that his way of thinking was out of step with the times. This criticism was not an isolated incident. Within the paddock, even figures close to Red Bull began to suggest that the authoritarian and unilateral model under which Marko operated was no longer compatible with a team seeking to modernize and adapt to a new generation of drivers and technicians. The most serious issue for Marko has not been the external criticism, but the lack of internal support. Several reports indicate that influential members of the team have begun to distance themselves, avoiding aligning themselves with his vision. There is talk of meetings in which his participation has been reduced, and of important decisions in which he is no longer consulted as frequently as before. This progressive loss of power within the structure has generated an atmosphere of isolation around him. For someone who was at the center of everything for more than 20 years, this type of exclusion is a clear indication that the organization is already operating as if he were not present. Although there has been no official announcement, everything indicates that Helmut Marko's departure will not be sudden or dramatic, but rather part of a quiet but firm transition toward a new leadership model. His role has gradually faded, and both inside and outside the team it is perceived that his influence is at a point of no return. One of the most illustrative cases of this crisis is that of Yuki Tsunoda. Following the departure of Liam Lawson, who had a very complicated start with the main team, Red Bull decided to promote Tsunoda from Racing Bulls, banking on his previous experience and knowledge of the environment. After the British Grand Prix, Tsunoda was blunt. He said he was a bit lost with the RB21 and described the car as incredibly slow on long runs. For a team like Red Bull, accustomed to having dominant cars, such comments cannot go unnoticed. But the most serious thing is not a driver's frustration, but what those words reveal about the car's technical problems. Tsunoda has described a sensation of excessive tire wear, a loss of efficiency he had never experienced before. Amid all the chaos Red Bull is going through, there is one figure who attracts more attention than any other, Max Verstappen. Four-time world champion, a key player in the team's recent dominance, And, without a doubt, the most valuable driver on the grid today, Max has made no secret of his frustration with the car's performance. Throughout this season, he has let his discontent be seen in various public statements and, more worryingly, in his body language during race weekends. Technical complaints have been constant, from a lack of balance to excessive tire degradation. Added to this is a fact that shocked the paddock. Talks between Max and Mercedes have been confirmed by multiple sources, including Helmut Marko himself. Although the words used were cautious, the admission that he could be in talks with the German team opened a new chapter in the story. That Marko has publicly acknowledged this possibility is a sign that the situation is not under control. Mercedes, for its part, has been searching for its next leader for some time, and Verstappen fits that profile perfectly. Red Bull has built its sporting and technical structure around Verstappen. From car development to race management, everything has revolved around his style, his demands, and his talent for years. The driver's departure would therefore mean not only a loss in results, but also an operational void that would require an almost total reconstruction of the team's strategic approach. Replacing someone like Max isn't simply a matter of finding another fast driver. It's a matter of redesigning the entire philosophy behind each weekend's work. The RB21's technical crisis has exposed structural limitations in the way Red Bull has operated. The wind tunnel, an essential tool in aerodynamic development, has become obsolete. The team won't be able to open a new facility until 2027, meaning that, even with changes in personnel or leadership, technical limitations will continue to affect performance for at least 2 more seasons. In this context, convincing Verstappen to remain with the team without clear guarantees of improvement becomes an extremely difficult task. Furthermore, the possible departure of Helmut Marko adds an extra layer of uncertainty. Although many believe his departure could pave the way for more modern management, it would also mean losing a figure who has been instrumental in attracting and developing talent. Marko was not only Verstappen's mentor but also key in building the Red Bull ecosystem. Faced with this situation, Red Bull's strategy is at a crossroads. The team must decide whether to cling to a structure that took it to the top but is now showing signs of wear, or to embark on a profound transformation to adapt to changing times. What's at stake is not just the continuity of a driver, but the future of an entire organization. With Christian Horner's departure already confirmed and Helmut Marko's position in question, Red Bull has had to act quickly to try to contain internal instability. In this context, the arrival of Laurent Mekies as the new CEO and team principal represents much more than a simple name change. It is a deliberate attempt to rebuild the team's authority and strategic direction. Mekies, with a solid technical background and experience in high-pressure environments such as Ferrari and the FIA, takes on one of the most demanding positions in the paddock at a critical time. He must not only assume operational control of the team, but also manage an institutional crisis unprecedented in the history of Red Bull racing. His first major task will be to restore internal order. The team has been enduring months of tensions, leaks, and power struggles that have eroded the cohesion of its structure. The challenge for Mekies is not only technical or sporting, but also political. He will have to rebuild broken bridges, redefine leadership roles, and establish a new, clear, functional, and credible line of command. Red Bull needs to regain the trust of both its engineers and drivers, and to achieve this, it will be key for Mekies to project authority, but also openness to dialogue. The era of unilateral decisions and unquestionable hierarchies seems to be coming to an end, and he must represent that change. From a technical perspective, Mekies also bears the enormous responsibility of reversing the RB21's poor performance. But his work doesn't end at the main team. Red Bull's structure also includes Racing Bulls, which has historically served as a platform for developing talent. With his promotion to the main team, Mekies leaves a void in the management of a sister team that could now be filled by Alan Permain, an experienced name who can provide stability. This internal move is key to maintaining the continuity of the Red Bull ecosystem, but it also demonstrates how closely connected the two teams are. What happens at one will inevitably affect the other, and Mekies must ensure the transition doesn't create further fractures. Laurent Mekies' success or failure as Red Bull's new leader will depend on his ability to simultaneously manage crises of different kinds: sporting, institutional, and cultural. He has the opportunity to begin a new era that modernizes the team and prepares it for the next major regulatory change in 2026. But to do so, he needs visible results in the short term and, above all, to keep key figures like Max Verstappen on the team. Everything happening at Red Bull isn't simply a difficult period, it's a profound transformation that could completely redefine the team's future. The possible departure of Helmut Marko, the uncertainty surrounding Max Verstappen, the poor technical performance of the RB21, and the arrival of new leadership with Laurent Mekies at the helm create a complex and unprecedented scenario in the team's recent history. The coming months will be crucial. Every decision made from now on will have a direct impact on the team's immediate future and its viability as a real contender starting in 2026, when regulatory changes will once again shake up the grid. In that context, losing key figures like Verstappen or Marko could accelerate a decline that will be difficult to reverse. This is not only an important moment for Red Bull, but for the entire Formula One team. What happens to the Austrian team will have consequences for the entire ecosystem of the sport. From driver movements to team reshuffling, everything is at stake. Now it's your turn. I want to know what you think about all this. Do you think Verstappen will stay at Red Bull if Marko leaves? Or are we facing an imminent departure that will completely change the dynamics of the championship? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.